It is 7:01 p.m. on September 3rd, 2024. We want to welcome everyone out to the Highland City Council meeting. We will begin our council meeting by having an invocation by myself, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance by Councilmember Kim Radella. So, our Heavenly Father, as we begin our council meeting, we are thankful for the safety which we've had here in our community and for the wet moisture which we've had to be able to help keep things wet and to keep things green. We're thankful for the blessings we find throughout going on. We're thankful for those who look after the city that take their time and effort to be sensitive. We appreciate those residents that engage. Heavenly Father, we ask that you'll be with us tonight as decisions are made or discussions are had, that we might be able to be enlightened, but also be respectful of one another's opinion, that we also might be mindful of those who are in our community that are struggling with many different, if it be with sickness or elements, but other things we might be mindful of how to be able to benefit our city. Please guide us as a council that we might be able to make good decisions that will help our residents in the future. And this we say in the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
All rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. At this time, we have item number 1, which is unscheduled public appearances. If there's anyone here, such as Nate, who would like to come up and address the council, we invite him up here at this time. You're the only one here, Nate, so I can kind of...
I am Nate Woodbury, and I'm just here. I know it's not an official agenda item, but I would love to invite, if it be possible, to vote in the affirmative for Olympus Precast Concrete as the fence choice. And I'm here if you guys have any questions.
Nate, I do have a question. Tell us what you found from the residents that you've talked to regarding the concrete block.
So this was last fall, and this was an option that I was looking into, and I thought it'd be a great way because we could use the pillars that are still in existence. But none of the residents showed any interest in that. They didn't like that option.
Doug, did you include that option in your survey?
Yes.
And what did you find?
I don't remember. There might have been one or two who said that sounded like an interesting, but it wasn't more than that.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
And just, Nate, since it's not on the agenda, it can't be an actual item. Does that make sense? So,
Even though it's been on the agenda and kind of almost voted for.
yes.
I would like to have us put it as an action item for the following meeting.
I believe staff has been looking at some things to be able to bring it forth back, because there was some to look at the options and that. So I know staff is sensitive about it. We actually talked about in our meeting this morning about trying to bring it in. And so I believe Jeff Murdoch's been doing some research on things. I know they've been trying to get some contractors to understand. I will tell on the block, just so I thought there'd be a lot of concrete contractors, because when you're doing block, that's more of a concrete contractor that would open up. But it appears if once you put a concrete contractor that says fence, then it narrows it down. But so on that, okay. Thank you. Okay. With that, we'll at this time we'll close. Is there anyone else like to come up for unscheduled public appearances? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close our unscheduled public appearances and bring it to item number 2, which is consent. We have 4 consent items. We have approval of our city council meeting minutes from August 6th and August 22nd, 2024. We have a personnel policy amendment this is just the definition of alcohol. If those who have maybe read that, it's dealing with hand sanitizer, that we can have hand sanitizer in the city since it had some alcohol in it. And then we have an appointment of the city has went through with Andy Spencer resigning his position, the city engineer. The cities went through and had interviews and has interviewed a candidate by the name of Chris Trustee, and it is a motion to appoint him as our city engineer. He has accepted the job, but we now need to go through his official appointment. Does anyone like to pull any of those consent items?
I do have one amendment to the to item 2A. Would you prefer for me to pull it, or?
Yeah, why don't we pull that just so you
All
can
right, let's pull that.
On the other 3 consent items, consent item 2B, 2C, and 2D, is there any need to be polled?
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
I move that the Highland City Council approve consent items 2B, C, and D concerning the approval of meeting minutes from August 22nd, 2024, the definition of alcohol, and the city engineer appointment.
I'll second that.
I have motion by Scott, second by Ron. If there's no further discussion, if we can go ahead and do electronic voting, if hopefully everyone's up. Ron, is it working? Why don't we go ahead and we'll do a voice vote on this one, Ron?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead and, those pass 5-0. Now we'll go on to consent item number 2A to Doug.
On the August 6th minutes, I'd like to add Assistant Public Works Director Jeff Murdoch to the list of city staff that were present. He spoke under item 4A, but was not listed on the city staff present.
Is there approval of that motion to make those, to add Jeff Murdoch present during the meeting?
And I move that the city council adopt the minutes from August 6th, 2024 with that amendment.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Okay, motion by Doug, second by Scott. Let's go ahead and, I think we'll probably have to do a voice vote on this one. So we'll start here with you, Brittany.
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Kim?
Yes.
Ron?
Yes.
Okay, that passes also 5-0. Now move on to action item. We have a public hearing, an ordinance. This is a text amendment. It's a text amendment is going to be on HB. That's House Bill 476, water-wise notice and subdivision process and sidewalk assurance. This will be our city attorney planner, Rob Patterson, will take this.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. They're disparate items, but the legislature put them all into one bill, so I'm putting them all into one code amendment. This was a bill that got passed this last legislative session. I included the most relevant portions of the bill. There are some items that the legislature passed that I am not bothering to put in on our code because they just apply by virtue of state law. These include some adjustments to how development agreements can function. We can regulate homes to prevent explosions of a certain size. And there's a 32 square foot setback addition allowed for rear setbacks for window wells and landings to get out of homes. So we're not including those in the current amendments, just know that those are part of state law now. What I have proposed are three kind of sets of code amendments. The first relates to water-wise landscaping. State law, HB 476, allows the sellers of newly built homes to inform, for cities to require that the seller of a newly built home to inform the first buyer of any water-wise landscaping. We do have a xeriscaping requirement for our park strip, so I proposed adding a requirement that the seller of a new home be required to inform the buyer that they might have a park strip water-wise landscaping requirement. Any questions on that item?
Can I ask this for a clarification?
Yes.
So if you're the first home buyer, so it's a brand new home, a contractor, if you hired a contractor, is that when the water wise, or if the seller sells the home? I was a little confused on that.
So it's the seller, this is almost word for word from the state statute. It's the seller of a newly constructed residence. So most of the time, that's going to be the home builder who buys it, who builds the home and then sells it to someone else. So it has to be whoever owned the home after it got built informs the first buyer. It doesn't continue after that, but they're supposed to give a notice. What I propose is I might just put it into our plat requirements. We have some landscaping things. I might inform them in there of that, and that'll just satisfy it and give them the heads up as part of subdivision of let people know that park strips need to be xeriscaped. So it's just going to be essentially from the developer to the first, whoever buys it. It could be a person, could be an LLC or someone. They're just supposed to inform them of this
The
requirement.
builder, so then they just walk through just to make, okay, let's assume Ivory Homes is the builder. Kim's the first, buys the home from Ivory Homes. Kim's now selling the home to me. Does Kim have anything she needs to share to that?
No.
Okay,
It's just
I thought I
Ivory
understood
to
it right.
Kim.
I just want to make sure I understood that right.
Yes.
Okay, so it's Ivory to Kim, not
Correct.
from Kim to the new.
So
My
to
only
quote-
concern would be if Kim buys it as an investment but never lives in it and is not a resident and sells it to Kurt, then Kurt's not aware of something and he's the new resident that has to put it in. But you're saying that, what is it you're changing that'll make sure that that's clear?
We will not address that. I mean, at some point, we expect people to figure out what they need to do for their homes, as with any home anywhere in Utah.
And I think Scott has a question.
I do. So is Kim moving?
Yes, to an ivory home,
Yes, okay. No, the
in which
question,
then I'll sell to Kurt as an investment.
yeah, it's got kind of convoluted here. Do you feel comfortable, because you're in charge of zoning, planning, and everything like that? Is our definition of xeriscaping pretty clear and concise? Because when we've worked with like the CUP and that, they always recommend we have some greenery and not just gravel there. And do you give them do you give people a list of things that this is what you can do?
We have some regulations about it, and it's pretty clear, but it's supposed to be a mix of living and non-living. But it's not super specific. And actually, we had talked a little while ago about updating our definition both for the park strip and for we have a 70% front yard landscaping requirement, clarifying that as well. It's actually something we've talked about bringing to the Planning Commission and Council. So
I would recommend that we do, because I think we need to be kind of clear if we're requiring it, what options. Because when the CUP was here, they basically said, you need some greenery and different things. Xeriscaping doesn't mean gravel. And, I think there's examples throughout the community of successful xeriscaping and some that are not. Originally, when they did all of American Fork Hospital, they made it a gravel pit. But now, there's greenery developing, and they actually brought in potted plants and stuff to kind of, soften things. So I think it'd be good to discuss that, because we want things to be beautiful, easy to maintain, but still water-wise.
And we will bring that back, perhaps as a quick discussion for the council to get some feedback on a proposal, and then we'll take it to Planning Commission. Jay had been working on that, and we kind of didn't know if we needed to really push it or not, but that gives us the direction to keep that moving forward.
It's hard to anticipate what people will do sometimes, and you think you're going overkill, and then someone puts asphalt on 3/4 of their front yard, and you're like, wow, I guess we really should have done that.
Yeah, but it's xeriscaping.
To some people.
In some people's definition.
To some people.
Yeah.
So we will work on that. Any other questions on this change? Okay. The next part, you remember just this year in January, we passed the big overall to our subdivision process. The state has tweaked that a little bit. Mostly it stays the same. There was a 15-day review period that previously was just for preliminary plats. That's now for all subdivision plats, preliminary and final, but just the plat portion that actually divides it into lots. The 20-day review period, which used to be for final plats and the plans, are now just for the engineering plans. So we still have the 20-day business days to review the engineering plans, which is what we need for those more complex details. One of the things they did highlight, they wanted to make sure cities didn't require those engineered plans both at preliminary plat and at final plat. I think that probably has come up in some cities. So we're tweaking the code, just make sure it's clear. At the preliminary level, we don't need the engineered plans yet. And then we have a full review cycle process. Again, that's just for the engineering plans now. And we had a provision that worried me when we first implemented it as required by the state, which was if we didn't catch an issue the first time around, we couldn't catch it later. They've changed it so it's just on the engineering plan. So if you miss something on a plat, a zoning or density issue, we can still bring that up and get it corrected. It's only on the engineering plans, and we can still require the correction if it's for a health or safety issue. So it kind of limits that exception down in a way that I like a lot more. So I've implemented all of these proposed changes. You can go to the next slide. I put the codes there where I've implemented the changes. They're also in the staff report. The major thing I've really done is we had some preliminary storm drain calculations we used to require at preliminary plat. Those were never really complete anyway, so we're just making sure you don't have to do engineering up front. Just know that you will have to do it for final plat. And we just need basic information of where you want to put your utilities and where you're going to connect to the city system. So those are the major things I'm changing with that. Any questions on that aspect? Yes.
So I haven't had the opportunity of serving on the Planning Commission, and of course there's been a lot of changes in that a lot of these things don't come to the council now. They go through the Planning Commission and our Development Committee and Review Committee. In the explanatory material, they talk about 4-cycle reviews and a lot of different terms in that. Could you just briefly kind of walk us through the application process that a developer would make? So we know that they don't have to have specific subdivision SIP plans, I call them.
So start at the very beginning
yeah.
of Kim's home.
But just right at the start with Kim's house. So,
So
what
Kim
do you need
bought
to do?
5 acres of land and wants to develop it.
Right.
Kim comes to me and says, how do I do that? So we go through 2 major steps. The first is the preliminary plat. That's the purpose of that is really just for them to look at their land, and when we did that sensitive lands ordinance, that comes up at preliminary plat. They need to know, do they have basically steep slopes, are the primary thing we're concerned about, that they need to factor into their lot design and road design, because that will affect where they can put things. So they'll do that, but the preliminary plat is to establish how many lots can you have, where are those lots going, where are your roads going, and generally where are you connecting to our utilities. They're not putting details of how they're going to connect all those things, but we know, okay, it's going to work like this. They have, Foxwood Estates, they have 24, 26 acres of land. They're putting in 20 lots. Great. That meets our R140 density. We know they're connecting the roads through. We have good circulation. The cul-de-sacs aren't too long. This will work as a concept. So we'll do reviews of that. They'll submit a set of plans, preliminary plat, and some basic utility plans to us. The review cycle is the cycle of they submit documents to us, we review them, make up a long list of comments, or short list, hopefully, and we send it back to them. They take those, they implement the changes on the plans.
That's the first review.
And that's
Okay.
one review.
Okay.
And we do that 4 times. That's the limit. Ideally, we get through it sooner. We don't want to take 4 times, just sometimes going back and forth.
Okay.
It's how good their engineers, how good are we at giving them the right comments and being clear. So we'll do that up to 4 times. So preliminary plat, we do a few cycles, get everything cleaned up. That now goes to Planning Commission. They hold a public hearing and then approve, likely with a list of stipulations. Now that that's done, it won't ever go to a public body again. Well, it will to our new board, but not to Planning Commission or Council, to our limited board. They then work on their final plat and their final subdivision improvement plans. The final plat is mostly going to be like their preliminary plat. It just says, this is what will get recorded at the county. We need the list of all the plat notes showing what's required on it. If there's geotechnical things, we'll put a note on there. This is where we'll put landscaping requirements. This is where we'll say, this lot can't have access off of this collector road. You have to access off the interior road. We have a long list of notes we put on there about utility easements and things on the one plat that gets recorded that divides the property into lots. So for Foxwood, for example, that final plat shows where they can't build in that ravine. It has, each lot has their property boundaries and then a new line showing beyond this you can't build, the slope is too steep. It also shows the roads because those get dedicated to the city as city property. So we will review the final plat and do cycles on that. Usually the final plat's easy. I mean, we do 1 or 2, but it's relatively straightforward. What takes a while is the civil engineering plans. Those are the plans of where they're going to run all the utilities, how they're going to connect, the slopes of the sewer lines, of the streets, how they're going to grade it throughout, how they're going to handle irrigation ditches that exist and pipe them. That's what takes a lot of time to get right to our city standards. So that's, again, we'll do 4 review cycles. If Todd were here, he would probably friendly but grumpily complain about our list of 80 comments that we give him back to correct. But we go back and forth several times to make sure that when we, as the city, take over those improvements, it's to our standards. So once we do up to 4 cycles, hopefully fewer, if it's a good set of plans, then we'll take it to our DAB, our new little board. That's 2 planning commission members, Jay, myself, and the city engineer. Then we'll approve the final plat and those subdivision improvement plans. They can take the plat to get recorded, depending. They have 2 options at that point. Either put in all the roads, so William's view, he chose to not record his plat. He's putting in all the roads and utilities first, and then once he's done, the city will come out and inspect, approve it, and then he'll record the plat and sell lots. Most developers don't do that. They post a bond with the city to cover the cost of all the improvements and go record the plat so they can sell lots while finishing the development. So they get money coming in while they're spending all the money to put in the improvements. That's Foxwood, and most developments go that way. So You'll see people building, but that's after we've approved the plans. They have a pre-construction meeting with Public Works staff. They'll come in and we'll hand them a set of plans. We'll stamp it, say, these are approved. You have half a copy with you on site. When we come out and do inspections, we're checking to make sure you match these, and we'll get regular reports back and forth. So that's a subdivision in a nutshell.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That explains it well. So the only time it then comes to council is if somewhere in the preliminary stuff they say, we want a zoning change, so it's got to go to the planning commission, then to us. Is that correct?
Correct. If they said, oh, you know, we're zoned R140, but we want to do an R120 development, or we want to do like a 10700 PD development, we'll say, well, staff can't approve that, planning commission can't approve that. We can take that as a zone change. It'll go to planning commission, public hearing, city council, public hearing, and the city council has final say. So you'll set then the rules that govern how that will get developed, and then we'll handle the plat portion per those rules as more of a staff level.
And all the details.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Sounds like you've got
Can I?
that really.
Oh, go ahead. Doug has. Then I have a backup.
Did I correctly understand you to say that the DAB is a public body?
It is. We've held 2 meetings. They're publicly advertised and open to the public. We've had no one show up to them.
Perfect.
We were going to name it the DORC, the Development Oversight Review Committee, but Andy Spencer objected to that, and now he's not here.
So Rob, my question, as
I'd
we're
like
getting prepared to do our general plan, you know, we talk about if in our general plan, so help me walk through and it'll help us give a kind of maybe a foreshadow what we are going to go in and we're going to put down a land use amongst all the ground in Highland, or there's currently already there. We might consider saying, hey, well, this area in our general plan, maybe we'll forecast that this might be an area for mixed use. That doesn't change the land use until we physically vote on it as a council, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
So we'll have a future land use table that we'll have 2 tables or maps. One will say, here's what your land currently is. And then the major thing we want to look at is, especially for undeveloped areas or perhaps areas we want to redevelop, I'm not sure if there will be any of those, do we want to have a different land use? Most of our land use is designated as low density residential, as you'd expect. But if there's an area, say we want to say a mixed use or commercial, even if it's zoned R140 currently, in the future land use, you could designate it. Doesn't mean, if you say we want to designate this area for commercial, it doesn't mean we're saying the C1 zone or CR zone. It just means we want a commercial type zone here in the future, but that what the details of that zone are still to be negotiated and approved by the city council in the future if you decide to go that way. The other major thing we do with the general plan that we need is our transportation. Some of you might be aware when there was a fight back in the day over Highland Glen, the road that goes next to it. By and large, the general plan is advisory. There's a state statute that says, though, that public roads have to conform to the general plan. And so the residents said, in that case, well, you don't show this road on the general plan, you can't build it that way. So we want to look at our transportation circulation network to make sure that's up to date. That's why we went through the whole 4800 West thing, because it had a classification for a collector and it was considered to be moved to an arterial. The city couldn't just upgrade it without putting it into the general plan. So that's something to be aware of as we look at the general plan is, what are we classifying our streets as? Where are we proposing new streets to go for connections? And then trails as well. Like with Foxwood, we had a trail in a general plan showed a little trail connection through the Canterbury area. So when Foxwood came in, we said, put a trail through there. And we negotiated that with them.
Thank you.
Is there anything else? I guess you got to go through sidewalks.
We have one more, yeah. The final thing that HB 476 changed was bonding for sidewalks. As I mentioned earlier, developers often put up a bond for all their public improvements so they can record their plat and then sell lots. Part of the problem that they come up with, and as staff we understand, the city will say, well, you have to put in your sidewalk as part of the development. They say, okay, we'll put it in, but then we sell the lot to a home builder who then drives a bunch of heavy machinery and equipment over the sidewalk and then breaks it. It always happens. The sidewalk always gets broken, the curb always gets broken, and then they have to replace it and restore it. Sometimes it ends up being that we have to do sections of sidewalk 2 or 3 times. The new state law says, allow developers to bond for sidewalks separately from everything else and allow them to record plats and get building permits for lots even when the sidewalk's not complete. But you can withhold a certificate of occupancy for a house until the sidewalk is complete. essentially, the goal, I think, is to make it so they only have to put the sidewalk in once after the home is built. So we think this is a reasonable approach to it. There are some terms about how to do those bonding, but we're essentially going to treat it like we do most of our other bonds. Any questions about sidewalk bonding?
Okay, with that, this is a public hearing, so we will now open up item number 3A, a public hearing and ordinance. It's a text amendment for HB 476, water-wise notice, subdivision process, and sidewalk assurance. Anyone would like to come up and address the council on that item? Seeing none, we'll now close the public hearing and bring it back for either a motion or further discussion.
Let me ask you a question about the sidewalks. You said cities can withhold certificates of occupancy. We're planning on doing that, I assume.
Yes. So state law says we can, and the proposed ordinance that I put in there says we will withhold
okay.
certificates of occupancy.
Okay, is there a motion?
I move that the City Council adopt and approve the proposed amendments to the Highland City Development Code.
I'll second it.
A motion by Doug, second by Scott. If there's no further discussion, we'll go ahead and go to vote. That passes 5-0. We'll now move on to item number 3B, which is a public hearing and ordinance. It's a text amendment on the building permit public improvements. And that will be Rob that will cover this.
Thank you, Mayor. As in my role, I sometimes get questions about when land comes up for sale. We had a UDOT parcel near SR 92 that was landlocked. The question was whether it could be built on. The question is, when these kind of odd parcels come up, what does the city require for a building permit to be put on them? We have some code existing regarding what we call non-conforming lots of record. These are lots that weren't subdivided. We just wanted to clean up the code a little bit to make it clear when a lot is considered non-buildable versus buildable. So the next slide I have, there we go. So it's two definitions, updating, and then one additional change. One is the definition of a zoning lot. So a zoning lot is, as currently defined, talks about having frontage on a road that's in use by the public. It's a little limited. I expanded to say it has to be a lot that was created legally, has frontage on a city road. It doesn't have to be in use by the public. It just has to be a city road. And it has to have city utilities, and the lot cannot have been designated for non-development purposes. So it can't have been a lot created for open space or conservation or common area. If they want to develop that kind of property, they'd have to come back to the city for some kind of subdivision process for that. And we may not allow it, depending on what kind of restriction it is. I have a property where there's a parcel that's common area, and people keep calling me asking if it's developable. I keep saying, no, it's not, because it was common area. I'm not sure how it was actually sold to you. So that was cleaning up. The next definition is non-conforming lot of record. These are typically old county parcels. Sometimes it's UDOT parcels where they've acquired it and split it off from an existing. This is something that existed legally at the time, likely because it wasn't subject to city subdivision rules back in the day, but isn't currently a zoning lot, meaning it doesn't meet our standards for size or frontage or setbacks or any of that. So they're allowed to build on it, but they'll have to bring it up to city standards. And so this is the final proposal which relates to that, saying that building permits can only be issued for zoning lots and non-conforming lots of record, but for those non-conforming lots of record, those are created, they weren't part of a subdivision, they just are existing. You have to bring up to city standards, meaning put in road improvements if need be, curb, sidewalk, gutter, put in utilities, and I relate to our current non-conforming use code for that. So that's just the cleanup. Any questions about that?
Have you had several cases of this so far?
Surprisingly, I've had 2 or 3 in the last couple of months ask about different parcels. There was a UDOT parcel off SR 92 coming up the dip. It's landlocked, so it's off the trail and it's behind homes. There's no way of accessing off a city street. It technically has frontage on SR 92, but UDOT will never allow an access, and UDOT had it up for auction. So the question was, a bunch of people came in and asked, can I build a home
I know
on
which
it?
one you're talking about, yes. Okay.
And I had to say, no, it doesn't have frontage on a city street. You don't have access. It's not utilities. And there's kind of some pushback. So I just want it really clear. in order for it to be buildable, you have to meet these standards. Now, this doesn't preclude the city from the future adopting a flag lot ordinance or something else where we create a new way of having a zoning lot. This just says, for now, either your lot has to be in a subdivision that was legally approved and developed, and if it wasn't, you'll have to bring it up to city standards, and if you can't, it's not buildable.
One question that I just noticed looking at the non-conforming lot of record. The proposed change says a lot of record that was legally created and developed in conformance with. Does something have to be developed to be a non-conforming lot of record?
Developed has a broader definition than.
Gotcha.
So it's more of you put improvements to it in some fashion. It doesn't have to be built on.
Okay.
This is also another item to public hearing. We'll now open up the public hearing for the text amendment pertaining to the building permit of public improvements. Is there anyone who'd like to come up and address the city council on this?
My name's Elizabeth Rice. So Rob just said something about flag lots, and I have a concern, and maybe I'm out of order. If I am, I'm not. Maybe you can clarify. But a flag lot, and I've looked at these in American Fork and Lehigh, and I've looked at them in Orem. They create mega problems. I have a son that's a police officer, and when they go into a situation in a flag lot behind another house, they don't know what they're going into. And I would dare say the same thing as for the fire department. So if flag lots, if they're not included, then I'm done.
No, flag lots are not being included. I was just using that as an example of what we call a zoning lot means you develop to city standards. You can change what those standards are to allow a flag lot in the future, but currently it's not permitted at all. We'd have to go through a whole code process to allow that. So.
Okay, we'll now close the public hearing since there's no one else going to come and discuss. Bring it back to council. Any further discussion or motion?
I'll make a motion if there's no further discussion. Okay. I move that the Highland City Council adopt and approve the proposed amendments to chapters 10 and 11 of the Highland City Development Code as delineated in the staff report.
I'll second.
Motion by Scott, second by Kim.
One clarification. Do we need to amend that slightly since the staff report included a, didn't the staff report actually include a different ordinance in this case?
Yes. Sorry, I attached the wrong ordinance to this one. Aaron sent out the corrected ordinance, which I'm sure you saw by email.
The attached new one.
Yes.
Okay, that's what I was talking about. So okay.
Do we need a reference, a certain ordinance number or anything on this, or just? Okay.
No, that's good enough clarification. Thank you.
Okay, so there's clarification. Okay, we're ready for a vote. That passes 5-0. We're now on to number 3C, which is a resolution of a site plan, engineer, and civil plan fees. That's also Rob.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So just as way of background, what a site plan is. We require these for residential units, but that's not what we're talking about. Whenever you build a home, you have to give a site plan as part of your building permit, but that's not this type of site plan. The site plans we're talking about are for generally commercial type or larger institutional uses. Site plans involve detailed engineering drawings showing utility lines, road access, parking lots. So our new Highland Mains has a site plan review that we're going through. All the Ridgeview retail ones each had a site plan that got reviewed and approved. It shows walls and landscaping, parking, and all of that information. There's an error on there. We do have separate application for architectural submittals. Sorry. Thought I tweaked that before I saved it. So that's the type of site plan we're talking about. Our Highland Grove across the way, when we did that office building, that went through a site plan that the council approved. So these are more extensive site plans. Jay, would you mind? So our current site plan application fee is $725. That is our highest kind of land use administrative fee that's not for a subdivision. But that's because but typically with all of our application fees for like subdivisions, we have two components. One is our application and planning fee, which the site plan application would cover, which covers processing the application, making sure it gets sent out to the right people, doing notices, holding hearings, and then my review for planning purposes of the site plan. And then we'll have a separate component, which is our engineering portion, which reviews all of those details. Public Works does it. We have engineering consultants who help do that. They make sure everything's done to city standards. So for subdivisions, we actually have two separate fees. You should go to the next slide. For preliminary plats, we have a planning fee of $795, an engineering fee of $2,250, which is what we're proposing for the site plan. Final plat has a smaller engineering fee of $450 and a little bit, a $779 planning fee. But the civil plans, which are the more detailed improvement plans for a subdivision, have a planning fee of $1,156 and an engineering fee of almost $3,000. So for subdivisions where they have those kind of complex things, we break it down into two fees. We just realized that we were processing Highland Mains and some other site plans. We collect a $725 fee, which covers the planning side of things, but doesn't cover any of the expenses that we do incur by having our engineers review and our public works team review all of these details. And we have done multiple reviews of different site plans, and so the city has lost, not lost, but that is a service the city's providing. We're proposing as staff to recoup some of that. We don't anticipate this will cover the full cost, but at least help balance it out a little bit so the taxpayer bears less of the burden of reviewing these site plans. These would, I propose the same engineering fee as for a preliminary plat. That's kind of the lowest baseline engineering fee. And the fee would cover two, as we talked about earlier, kind of two cycles of reviews. If they require more, we'll have them pay an additional fee before they get to move ahead with their review. Any questions on this?
Yeah, one little question I had. So the current fee is $725, and you're proposing a new one, $2,250. You know, that comes to like $2,775. Why not just round it to $3,000?
We could. I was just using I wasn't changing the
You were just using kind of standard. I just wondered. I mean,
no reason to not do it.
Okay, I was just curious.
I was just basing off our lowest engineering fee that we had. Any other discussion? Anything else, Ron? I don't have anything else. This doesn't require a public hearing.
You said this does not.
Does not.
Yeah, I was going to say that I didn't have it down as a public hearing. So if not, if there's not further discussion, we can have a motion on this.
I'll make a motion. I move that City Council approve and adopt the resolution imposing a $2,250 fee for site plan engineering and civil plan review.
Second.
Have a motion by Kim, second by Doug. If there's no further discussion, we'll go ahead and go to vote. That passes 5-0. We're now on to expedited items. This is not item number 4A, Jeff Murdoch. I think you could give us a little input on cameras.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor and Council. This will be fairly quick. The purpose for this purchase is to purchase a sewer inspection camera and also a bypass pump. The reason for the camera, it's to reduce our dependency on TSSD. Right now, currently, we're on their schedule once a month to come and run their cameras down our lines, which has been reduced over the last 4 or 5 years. We used to get them a couple times a month due to the demand in some of the larger communities around that are serviced by TSSD. We've been reduced to one day a month. And we're hoping with that it will increase the efficiency of our system, that we'll be able to run this camera and check some of our lines, and we won't have to rely on them to come and run their cameras down our lines when needed or hire it out to a private contractor. Also, the bypass pump, that's to improve response times on sewer backups or flooding situations. As we experienced just a couple weeks ago down in Canterbury, we had a lot of water that was accruing in the streets, and we simply just needed to move that water down the street to get to another sump. We utilized our vac truck. It's not the best piece of equipment to do that. It was effective and it worked, but a bypass pump would be a lot more effective. So this would manage both planned and unexpected emergencies that arise through our sewer system and our storm drain system.
Do you know, apologies, I didn't check in earlier. Do you know offhand about what it costs us when we have to rent a camera?
I honestly don't know.
Okay.
I can check into it and get back with you.
No worries.
Scott?
So I don't have any problem with the bypass pump. I think that's essential. I'm just curious why we need to run the sewer lines more frequently than once a month. With all the fee increases from the TSSD, I would think they would be more responsible for keeping everything running. I mean, are you having a lot of need to run a camera through the sewer system for $91,000?
That's typically the way that we find out if we have issues and if we have roots growing in our systems or infiltration. It's just been part of their service over the years, is to provide that as part of their service. And with the equipment, they've had equipment failures. They haven't replaced as much equipment in the past, from my understanding. So they only have, I think, 2 camera trucks to service the whole district. So yeah, we are limited in what service we do get from them.
But how often do we need to do this? Are you going to do it 2 or 3 times a month? Or I just didn't understand why we need to, if they're already doing it available once a month, why we need to do it more than once a month.
Our thoughts are is that we'll be able to reduce any further damage from roots, from infiltration. We'll be able to do it in-house ourselves, locate problems, locate laterals when residents come in and need a lateral located. If we don't have the records of it, we have to hire that out from a separate contractor. And also on our storm drain system, it'll also run down our storm drain pipes, and we can locate and identify problems in our storm drain system as well.
Are you finding that once a month is not enough? I mean, is there an instance you could say, hey, if we would have had this twice a month, this is something we could have caught, or is it just more for convenience?
It's a little of both. It's hard to say how much has been caught in the past by having a camera around down it, but one day with a camera, you can only get several hundred feet of sewer main cameraed. And so that's pretty limited. Within 12 months of the year, you only have a couple thousand feet of pipe that gets cameraed each year. So we kind of guess and try to identify locations that we think are having issues, and that's where we send them to camera the lines. There may be other areas in town that haven't had a camera down them for years that probably should have, that may have issues that we just don't know about yet. And with a camera, we'll be able to hopefully identify those and be proactive with our maintenance.
So what's the lifespan on this camera? I mean, we're going to have to replace it every couple years, or is it going to last a long time? Or
with proper treatment, they last. I don't know the lifespan of them, the exact amount of years, but proper treatment and care for them, they last several years.
Is it a camera? Is it a truck? As you said, we had to get the truck. Is it a truck?
So it's a camera that almost looks like it's on a remote control type car. So you'll set it down in. It has cables that run off of it. It's a power cable ran off a fiber optic line. You set it down in the trough of the sewer line, and it actually has wheels that you can control forward and backwards, and you can rotate the camera head to inspect pipes, to inspect gaskets, the joints, the laterals, and you could basically just drive it up the line, and to retrieve it, you just drive it backwards. So it has wheels, interchangeable wheels for different size of pipe and different traction material.
so the camera has the wheels.
Yeah, it's all part of it's all kind of one unit. It's a unit that sits down on the ground, almost like a drone. A drone has a camera on it. It flies in the air. This just sits in the pipe and will drive up and down the pipe. Currently, one of our reasons also to purchase a camera is we've had a few instances in the last couple of years where we borrowed cameras from neighboring cities, communities, because we've had the need for it, and we just feel like we're out wearing our welcome with some of our communities. We just don't want to be continuously borrowing their equipment to make our inspections.
When you were talking about the current approach, you talked about making our best guess of where we have the problems and then sending TSSD out there to do it. That sounds to me as if we're not using staff time to do the current camera trips. If we're doing them more frequently, what are we trading off? Do you have any idea what we would otherwise be doing with that time that we'll be running the cameras instead?
Not necessarily. I mean, we have two full-time individuals on our in our sewer department currently. This will be part of the duties split between them and our storm drain personnel. There's three of those members. So our goal is to just get more lines cambered each year and to try to keep up on some of these areas that have been a little bit neglected.
Can I, just out of curiosity, did we use a camera? So, Council, you're probably aware that in 6400 West, we thought we had some water lines. Did you go on camera? Is that how we found out we didn't have water lines, or is it just someone digged and they couldn't find it? Would the camera helped us in this situation?
No, because it's a culinary line, so they're under pressure. They're pressurized lines, so you can't insert a camera inside those lines unless you decommission those lines and cut a hole in them to run a camera. But typically, the cameras are only used for sewer mains and storm drains.
Okay.
So would this help, like, Mayor, when was it, a few years ago, when it was your neighborhood, I think, who had a flushing problem? Where
we had usage issues.
where like things were getting flushed regularly, right? And it was super expensive to repair and they had to keep cleaning it out. Could you detect something like that using this camera? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, you can. I mean, when you go up the lateral or up the main lines, you can look up laterals. I mean, you can only see up a couple feet or a foot or two, but you can see if materials caught, if there's grease, different materials that cause problems with our lift stations. Grease is a huge one. If we're noticing a lot of grease in our lift stations, if we go camera the lines in that local area, typically you can find out which laterals are contributing to that grease problem just by the residue in the laterals.
So, Brittany, were you wondering if the flip-flop came from my house?
The flip-flop, the full salads, there were a lot of things. Kim and I went on a
what
full
wasn't
tour.
there?
Yeah.
But flushable wipes are a problem for sewer lines, is that correct?
Yeah, they're a huge problem. They advertise them as flushable. They do not spend enough time in the sewer system to biodegrade. So they end up in your pumps and impellers, and they cause a lot of problems. They're probably one of our number one causes of problems.
I became aware of that on the Planning Commission years ago, and it just boggles my mind, and I'm not one to like a lot of regulations, but it seems like the government should come in and say, hey, these aren't flushable. Don't say they're flushable if they're not flushable.
Yeah.
I mean, we can't be that unique in our sewer system that this is creating a problem throughout the nation, and I just can't believe that nobody stepped forward and said, can't we get some regulation around this?
Right.
It's
I mean,
a misnomer.
they will eventually biodegrade in the sewer systems, but they don't spend enough time going down the sewer system into our wet wells and then being pumped out. That's about a day trip. They won't biodegrade that quick.
I don't know, Ron. Next thing we know, you're going to be opposed to people marketing things as flushable flip-flops.
So, as we, yes, it's all disposable. So, Jeff, when we were putting the budget together for this year, was this contemplated? I noticed it's in the budget. Was this contemplated to go buy a camera? Is that correct?
Yes, both of these were in the budget. In the packet that I sent out, or that got sent out earlier, there was a discrepancy in the
budget
in the
item.
storm sewer budget. It's supposed to come out of 544059, not the one that was posted in the packet. And if you look on the notes on that line item, on that GL code, it was noted for trucks, sewer camera, and a bypass pump.
Further discussion or information?
Just real quick on sewer lines. My daughter had this problem in her home in West Jordan, West Valley City, actually. The sewer lines backed up way down line, and it stopped up and backed up all the homes, and her basement sewage was coming up through the floor drains. You're aware of the one-way valves you can put in your sewer line going out of your home, either inside the home or right outside the home. Do those work?
Yes, but they do have to be maintained, and they eventually will either get stuck open or closed. So it's something that you will need to have permanent access to in order to.
Well, it would have access. I'm looking at doing it. I want to finish my basement the next couple of years, and I want to check the sewer drain before I do a thing. I'm not touching it until I camera that.
Our sewer
sure I'm
superintendent recommends putting it outside your house.
Outside.
Outside in a manhole section or something accessible to get to it.
Yes.
He wouldn't recommend putting it in your house, but you can place it wherever you'd like.
Yeah. Well, I just wondered if it worked. Then I wondered, is it worth it for the city to mandate those kinds of things so that, are we liable when that sewer line's up? In West Valley City, it seems like the city came in and made those homes right, but I'm not positive about that. That's a cost to the city. If we had those required, is there any municipalities that are doing that you're aware of?
I don't believe so, because what we currently own and maintain is the main itself. We don't maintain any of the lateral. The residents maintain from the main line all the way into their home. We don't maintain any of their sewer lateral. They're the 4-inch lines.
Yeah.
If we started implementing those, we would have to take ownership of those laterals.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I'll make a motion if we're ready. I move that City Council approve the purchases of a bypass pump in the amount of $31,347 and a sewer inspection camera in the amount of $92,632.87 and authorize the city administrator to sign the purchase contracts.
I'll second that.
Motion by Kim, second by Ron. Is there further discussion or clarification? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and vote. Passes 5-0. Our next items are communications items. First communication item is number 5A, which is naming of the new park. As a lot of everyone's aware that for the past couple of years, we've been trying to decide what the name of the park is. You know, Brooklyn, you even kind of brought up a unique idea this last spring. Maybe you could try to go about that. Want to just kind of talk a little bit about that. There's been some options that have come up. And if you know, we want to be sensitive because we're talking about some donors and things that way. But as we go forth, I'm going to use acronyms such as SMIS as a name. So it's not. So if we have the Smith family approach us on the naming of the park, but if we have the Smith family approach us, one of the questions we need to ask ourselves is on the naming of the park, what would be some of the things we'd be looking for? I know that there had been a discussion a couple years back by the city council, and my understanding it was a discussion item only. It wasn't an actionable item. It was just kind of a communication as we went forth on that. In that communication item was kind of asked what would be some of the donation amounts. Brooklyn, I have the poster there. Would you maybe show that poster? So the council came up with a kind of a poster that we have shown a couple times at the Highland Fling, at open houses. And this is, okay, if you would like to do a donation, this is kind of what we were looking at. So traditionally, when we were looking, like if you're looking at a pavilion or you're looking at things, we were looking to say what percentage of a cost would that donation cover. And so we see some of these are funded, such as I think we like if you look at some of the pavilions or you're looking at different things, we're saying, okay, could we get 75 or 80% of that cost covered by a donor? And so we went out there. We've had, Scott, I think you have a list. How many donors do we have?
Yeah, let me just talk about that briefly. So I had Ed Dennis kind of download everything, all the donations that have had come in from the Mountain Ridge Park. We've had 27 delineated different donors, and we're talking about between $500,000 down to $25. But through Adobe, there's been another $11,000, $12,000 from various donors that they donate to their fund. And then also through Venmo, we've been getting donations as well. So there are a lot of people who have donated towards the park. I'll pass out a list of the donations. I've got one for Brooklyn with kind of the other things. But most of what's come through the foundation's been for the Mountain Ridge Park.
As the item down here is naming the park, if you notice on most of the marketing we did where it says the park name and rights, we have it down as a TBD, to be determined, and that they were to contact the mayor. We've actually, thank you for that, showing the poster. Does that help everyone kind of clear what we've been? Now, there was discussions about what the naming dollar amount would be, and at the time when the council talked about the naming rights, once again, this was in a discussion item only. It was the dollar amount of $1 million was presented. And so with that, want to kind of discuss, so if we have the Smith family that comes in and approaches the council, or approaches myself, which, if the Smith family comes and approaches and says, hey, we'd like to donate, I worked with them on the different things. And we actually still have several out there, like with the pavilions. There's 2 pavilions that still could be named. I keep talking to different individuals. I thought I had one, but then they moved on to a different type of donation at the park. But with that, I want to be sensitive as we look at the naming of the park. I think we're all aware that we have there with the donations. If we need to get maybe better clarification. I think what's happened is to help us to go out to the donors, we need some clarification on what we'd be looking at if it was naming of the park. Meaning, if the Smith family approached us, would it be, $1 million, and what type of agreement would that be? Would there be other ties to the name? And if we need to say, hey, we need to do more research on this, can we maybe do a work session on this to go out to the park? I'm happy to do that. If we feel like we'd like to kind of discuss this a little bit more tonight, we can do that. What's the council like to do?
There's a lot of questions that I have regarding, for example, how many years? Is it is it infinity? And what about redevelopment 20 years from now?
So actually in our agreement, this is actually one of the questions that came up recently with a donor. We had in there, and we had that if it was actually on, we have a donor for one of the fields, and that donor asked, well, hold it, it talks about if the field is redone, that we would now, at that time, that name is gone. And so they asked that same question in our agreement. So the agreements have been somewhat flexible, that we've negotiated with different individuals, and sometimes this individual's asked for a change on what the time is, exactly what your question is.
Yeah.
That individual's now come and asked us before they finalize their donation.
Well, those are the kinds of discussions that I'm not prepared to make any decisions tonight. I don't think we need to have a work session.
I'd love to have a work session also, because you have your donors and then you have pledge, where, you can have somebody come in and say, I'd like to donate, $1 million to the park, but I don't have the $1 million, but I would like to pledge, $100,000 over a 10-year period kind of thing. So those are things we need to take into consideration as well, is how do we want to handle that situation? And I always say I love to look at how other entities have done their donations. Higher ed is always really good at fundraising and looking at a percentage of naming rights, kind of thing like that. So I think it'd be a good work session discussion. I think my main thing, though, is once we have determined what we're looking for, that it is written in a contract with expectations all down. So then there's no going back and forth of what do you get. It's written in an agreement.
So Rob, we have an agreement that individuals enter into. So most of the donations at a certain dollar amount or for a certain item, we actually have a written agreement.
Okay. Do we just not have one for the naming of the park?
Well, we haven't had anyone, it hasn't been presented forward to have that contract put together.
I guess I just want the agreement written before anything's even been brought forward, so you already know that expectation of what you're donating for.
So what you're saying is, hey, if we're going out and asking someone to donate for the name, what comes with that, the length of time, is there other criteria such as, I know we've talked as a council, is the name, the name, do they get to determine the name, or are we saying, hey, no, we feel it's important to have the name Highlands somewhere in that name? You know what I mean? And that's what I think you're asking for, Kim, is maybe a little better for clarification. So when we're talking to them, they understand the expectation. They go, hey, you have it for 30 years. Here's your expectation. The council has a feeling they'd like to have the name Highland somewhere incorporated in the name. Is the council, am I thinking the right way?
Well, I guess the only question I have with that is, why, if you name the park, would you ever change the name? I mean,
it would just be a potential
kind of
redevelopment.
confusion,
Well, no,
I would
but
think.
Scott brings up something very important, because if we redevelop, let's say, a pavilion, let's assume a new pavilion, in the agreement, that new pavilion can then have a new donor go. What we're saying is the naming rights really is kind of, this might be a little larger right, because how are you going to change the name of the park 30 years in?
Yeah. But also, when you have a live donor, that person's life is still being, there are things that happen in people's lives, and sometimes there are actions happen that you don't want that park named after them. So there really is live
school.
Donor versus dead donor.
No, so a school has been very careful on who they do as donors, because sometimes there's been events later on in
Exactly.
life that they've said, hold it, how?
We need to change it.
Yeah.
I don't think that it's an issue with this particular park,
No.
but the other case that comes up is that the organization gets in tight financial spot and sells it.
He sells the park.
Sells the park. It sells whatever the asset is. I mean,
Well, I don't think that would happen.
like I said, I don't think that's going to be an issue with this particular park.
Right.
Anyway,
But
how would you guys like to move forward
Let's
with
do.
it? Would we,
Do you guys want to do a work session? What are you
guys wanna do a
thinking? Or
work session on this?
How about if we do a work session at the park?
So we could go actually look at some areas. I think we're right there
yeah,
at the park.
Scott, like a picnic.
Actually, that's not a bad idea. So Chuck,
Let's do a picnic.
We had fun last time.
Yeah.
That actually is good. Are we hungry? No.
Yes.
What do you guys think? We're doing a work session there at the park. We can go actually, we can maybe get an update what's going on at the park, but we can also look at who we've had donors on, look at your list and say, hey, this is where we've had donors. We maybe can, now I know that Brooklyn, I think you've been looking to maybe try to get some plaques and we can understand, hey, if we're going to be by the flag, where would we see this donation plaque being? And then we also can look at, one thing we need to look at, we have 2 monument rocks. We need to kind of, one thing that was never clear, whose names, I think we kept saying it was 5,000 or more, but we need to get that clear. What is the wording on that rock? You know, and who,
Right.
and does it say your pavilion and then the name, or is it just the name of all the donors?
Or tiers also. If you
Okay.
donate more, your name's
'Cause that was
bigger
what we
versus
talked
smaller. Yeah. Let's
And we need,
hash it
I
all
think
out.
this is where we've been, and it possibly I'm the one that thought we've been a little loose on this. We need to kind of now tighten it in, and I think get it, so it's clear. And that way, when we go talk, and we do have a donor, a very kind donor that is considering this name, and so we need to make sure we're clear with them and concise, so they know exactly what their opportunity is.
Can I make one more comment? So I passed out the list of the donors. I just appreciate if it would stay in the council and the staff. I wouldn't go publish it on the internet or something like that. But, I think we as council need to know kind of an idea how many people have been involved donating. And there's a lot of people that have donated $1,000 or more dollars. And I think they should be acknowledged, some way in the park, because $1,000 is a lot. Some people 500 and things. So we probably ought to, and there was another donor for a tree, which is great. I didn't realize that. Yeah.
The reason is also might help us do one last push. I know it sounds funny. When we do a push, I do get some emails, because there's some emails here where a lot of people wanted to donate for like a bench. Now, they don't have really a lot of benches, but we need to say, what does it look like? Because if we can start putting pictures on the website, this is what the name looks like on the bench, I think you get more. Or if by a tree, if you're donating for a tree, this is what it looks like. We got to give visual to the individuals. And I apologize, we've probably not been as clear on some of this, because even myself, like I said, this one donor that is another substantial donor that's not down here, their concern was, and because they're looking at a field, fields get rehabbed or redone more often than maybe a pavilion. Well, they're worried because that could be a common practice after 10 years, and it's a substantial donation, so they want to be, so that might help. Rob, is that giving some good clarity what we need to have?
Yes. The only other clarification we need is when.
Could you guys, we don't have a council meeting next Tuesday. Would next Tuesday work?
works for me.
Works for me.
What time?
What do it gets
dark at 8
It's
o'clock.
dark at 8. We probably ought to do it at 6, 5:30 or 6.
Yeah,
I could
earlier
be
the
here by
better.
6.
So 6 would be about the earliest.
Yeah. About
It
the
was
earliest.
still light out there at 6. Is it light enough at 6 that we can see everything we need?
Oh, yeah, it should be light till 8.
I was out at Mountain Ridge Park between 6 and 7, and it was beautiful lighting.
Okay, next Tuesday, 6 p.m., Mountain Ridge Park. Stephanie, we'll need to post that we'll be having a work session there, but that will help clarify. I'll work with Rob trying to get some clarification, but we could show, maybe we ought to give the council, once again, we approved an agreement, but we've kind of, some of these new agreements, we've had questions, and maybe what some of those rights are.
And I would like Mayor to, maybe we could come with ideas about about possible names. I like the idea of including something that says it's a Highland Park, or acknowledging that it's a city park rather than just an individual park.
Is that important to others? Like to have it something with the Highland name in it?
It is to me as well.
It is to me.
Okay.
No, We already have Highland. I don't know. I just look at all the other parks in cities, and most don't have the city name in it. So we already have Highland Glen Park. So it's not important for me to have the name Highland in it. But I think there's some great park names out there that would be really good for this park.
We'll kind of got a little bit of direction there, what we can maybe look at. Okay, next. And this, I think, is going to be a good, I really want to look at this rock, by the way. I think there's some clarity we need to get on what we're putting on the stone. Because once we make the decision here and what we have with our donors, we need to kind of, by the end of, probably the next council meeting on the 17th, we need to be given direction because we're heading into the winter. The reason I'm saying is, if you remember the two stones, they had plastic over the top. The reason is there's two holes there for the name of the park, plus the side of the stone will need to be etched. We need to get that all put together. We're gearing towards, if everything comes together, a grand opening in November, similar to what we did for the back half of the park. And we'll have to get there. And Jeff, if we can make sure we get an update on how the baseball diamond, the two soccer fields, I'd like to kind of just also look again where the Ninja's at. Maybe we can kind of get a feel where the trails are coming in. We have some baseball improvements, with if you're going to be putting a little shack there. Maybe give us that vision again of what's kind of going on, and then we can, once again, we need to now look at all the donation areas. We need to go to the doggy water fountain. We have a donor for, we have that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a doggy water. Yeah. You're not supposed to say.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Yeah.
I always, to be honest, I show that. Okay, I have a question for Jeff. I don't know if you know. There is, at the pickleball thing, there is a yellow button you push, or you push it and a flashing yellow light. What is that for at the park? It went off, but I went and pushed it and it didn't go off. I saw someone else. Is it turn the lights on?
I was wondering if it's a timer for
The
if
lights,
people are
maybe that's
waiting.
what it is. Because they
Right.
have one by the basketball. I was just curious because someone pushed it and going, hey, the lights just went on. And I go, is that to tell people that the courts are full and they need a, I couldn't get it to happen again.
I'll find out, and I'm not 100% sure what that's for. I will find out.
And maybe if there's
I think you should never push a button unless you know what it's for.
I might drop. If there's any pickleball players, we could entertain after the work session to hit a couple of pickleballs and have a little fun. I will tell you, I love the courts. I go there and play pickleball quite a bit.
Yep.
So we'll have to,
Practice up,
I'll need a partner.
She's getting good.
Him and I.
Okay.
Since we kind of digressed a little bit, can I ask where we are in the Ninja Court?
Do we have an update on the Ninja Court?
It's ordered, and we're just waiting for the parts to be delivered.
I went out to Eagle Mountain, so if you're interested to see what it looks like, I was out there actually yesterday and saw it. I talked to the skateboarders. I talked to some neighbors about who's using it. I actually talked to one kid that was there trying to, what I'm hearing is no one's been able to run the whole course yet, but the one kid was trying to do sections, and his goal is at some time to be able to get it. And when I saw him run the big red thing, he wanted me to look and cheer him on. It was like he goes, hey, I got up it. It's quite a course.
I was out there today. They've torn up the trail that we had to relocate.
Yes.
So they're preparing the ground still.
Does that give you an update? We'll get a good update next week. But we'll also want to really look at Rob. We'll want to talk about this agreements and things that way. So, okay. With
In
that,
Highland Glen Park, I walk my dog to the park from my house, and I pass a bike park that I did not know existed.
bike?
A bike.
Highland Bike Park. Yes.
Yeah, what is the status there? It says
They're
closed
redoing
for
it.
construction.
Yeah, they're redoing it.
redoing
They've
it.
had some damage or vandalism down in that area.
But that, I've
It's
lived
a
here
pu- it's-
13 years and did not know.
It's
that.
called a pump and jump park,
Yeah,
where the kids do it. We actually have
it
another.
looked fun. I'm sitting there going, I'm going to go get a mountain bike.
Yeah.
So we actually, Ron, if you want to, we actually have another pump and jump and mountain bike course on the down Canterbury North, which is on the south end of Dry Creek Lake.
Yeah.
The city owns 50 acres, and there's quite a few bike trails and pump and jump areas.
I just applaud the city for having that.
So those are, by the way, when we talk about donors, that bump and jump by the high school is total donor that's putting all that in. Then we had some Eagle Projects and other donors that did it down there at the Canterbury North. I mean, so we do get donors that come in on different aspects to help us with our parks. So, okay, with that, let's move on to our next communication item, which is a community development update. Jay Bachman.
All right.
Oh, by the way, if you haven't noticed, Erin's not here. I apologize, I didn't excuse. She did not feel well, and so she headed home earlier today. So, OBJ.
So you may not have noticed, but I'm actually in charge. All right. Well, we have some exciting news. We are holding on September 18th from 5:30 until 7 o'clock. Actually, it's 5 o'clock. I've got 5:30. Yeah, I guess 5 o'clock for me, so I can help set up. Sorry. 5:30 to 7 o'clock here in the Highland City Council chambers is the first general plan community visioning open house. So now we've been doing a lot of community engagement at other events like the Fling open house, other things like that. We'll actually have a booth at the farmers market this week. But this is the first event dedicated to getting feedback from the community about the general plan. That's one of 3 that we'll be holding throughout the next few months. One exciting thing that I think is really cool is as we talk about the future of Highland, we're actually having the Highland Youth Council participate because they are the future of Highland. And so they will help with those who are city government geeks that want to do this sort of thing. Will have an aspect, a booth or an easel that they can man to help explain some of the aspects of the general plan that we'll be updating. So this is a really cool opportunity for them to get involved, and I'm really excited about it. Any questions about that?
A side note about community development. I was approached, was actually the couple that organized the car show, of why does Highland not have its own Chamber of Commerce? And having, just for background for myself, having been involved with the Chamber for the Highland Fling, it was about 0 involvement from the Chamber that was promised early on but never delivered. I don't know that we're getting served, our businesses in Highland are getting served by the American Fork Chamber. I know this is a public meeting and this is going to be in the minutes, but I really am concerned that maybe it's time for us to start looking at what do we have to do to bring in a Chamber of Commerce for Highland.
So they've done what's called the Lone Peak Alliance, and that's being ran by the AF Chamber, the American Fork Chamber. As Ron, what you're saying, that Lone Peak Alliance does not seem to be too strong. And maybe as we kind of look, if we can get Highland Mains to come in, that might be bringing another 15 to 20 businesses. We've talked about at one time doing a luncheon or some different socials. This is a city to bring our businesses in and talk about issues they have. And so maybe that's something we have to look at, and then we can maybe get a sense from them if they would support a chamber. I mean, is it something that we just do as a city on a quarterly basis and have a little lunch where they come together with us and we hear? Alpine does not have a lot of business. Cedar Hills has the area by Walmart, so they're getting a little bit more. They probably have more. I mean, we say that Alpine actually does have quite a few insurances and physical therapy and things that way. But,
And Daylight Donuts.
And they like donuts.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be. It just depends if they'd support it. It's hard, but we. So. One person to talk with is Melissa Wright at Eagle Mountain. She runs the chamber and started a chamber out there. So she would kind of have a good understanding how you start and what the. And we might see her at ULTC in the next couple of days, so I could talk with Melissa. And if not, I'm even happy, Ron, if you want, we can run out to Eagle Mountain. And when I went out to go see the ninja course there, the text with Melissa was, why don't you stop in the chamber and get a soda drink? Because I guess she's right next to the soda thing. So if we had some that want to go out, we could go visit Eagle Mountain. They're the newest chamber, that started, and they might give us an idea. So, okay, with that. Now, Jay, I just want to make sure, what date is that
September 18th.
Okay,
Which
on
is
the
a
Wednesday.
Thursday. Wednesday?
Wednesday, the 18th.
Oh, that's right.
Now, I want to, council, as we look at dates, we also have down on the 12th, a week from this Thursday. I don't know if everyone noticed, we have what's called a Ridgeview Welcome Dinner. What the thought is there is The library is going to be there. I don't know if public safety, if you're thinking of having anything there. It'll be a little bit of a mini open house, but geared right at Ridgeview. Some of the thought is
In their park?
in their park, we're going to do some hot dogs we're flipping? Are we having a bounce house? Maybe Brooklyn, give us a little bit update on that.
Yeah. So there is going to be a couple bounce houses. We confirmed it with HOA that it's okay to do that. We got a certificate and everything. The library will be there with a bunch of booths, and the youth council is going to help with that. And then, I think Rob is flipping some hot dogs, right? Yep. And then we've got some grills coming in. So we're all set to go. We just need you guys to be there. That's all.
Do you have any plans if there's inclement weather? I mean, do we just cancel it?
Great question. I don't know. I honestly didn't think about
it's kind of like
that.
storming right now. So.
Well, we'll have to do it earlier because hopefully
Right.
we're just going to hope to have it. The reason why we've kind of pushed this is we recognize there's probably a lot of new residents over in Ridgeview. And I'm just going to, here we're in a public meeting, but if you moved into Ridgeview, into Highland, and what you hear in Highland is we're a large lot community and that we figure, but that's not them. And I think we need to welcome them. The other thing is, to be very open, that came very evident to me, we need to tell them about some of the services we have. We have this new park, and they've really kind of helped give us the financial boost to get this park done. And we need to let them know to come use it. The other thing is they're right next to some other communities' stores. We need to let them be aware of some Highland stores. We need to let them be aware that we have grocery stores over here. We have, a car wash over, to let them know what the Highland services that they could, but I just think it's time we welcome to Highland. I mean, they need to know that they're welcome here and that we want them to come use our library. We want to show them our different parks we have. Naturally they have Highland Glen, but to make sure that they know that we appreciate them as residents.
Mayor, I have a question. So the HOA lady I've been talking to said that some of those businesses over there, like I think Sippin, right, and the Valet Clippers, they heard about the event and they were wondering if they could come, and I wasn't sure if that was appropriate, so I haven't responded yet.
I don't know why couldn't they come?
They can. Okay.
And
they could give out coupons for free
it might be
haircuts or
nice to
drinks.
even have, if we have one of the Yummies or the ice cream place, if they want to come buy one, get one. If we have it might be nice to reach out to some. Hey, we have a lot of new residents. Now, the reason is we have a lot that are rentals because Boyer has a lot of rentals. So there's probably been a lot of turnover, which almost 200 units over there are rentals, guys. Now not all of them are done, but we have a lot of new homes that have come in. The David Weekly, we have, the Lenars that have put in. We have a lot of new homes there. We have a lot of new residents. And we just want to go and tell them welcome. Welcome to Highland, and see if there's questions, how we can help them. We want them to know that the police are there patrolling.
We park wherever we want to.
I'm sorry, what?
There's parking restrictions. Can we just park wherever we want to over there?
Yeah. No, we're going to be at the park, so we should be okay. Our parking restrictions are closer to the high school.
Got it.
I will tell you, and I think when we went over there, when they called and said there were parking issues, when we showed up, I will tell you, the residents said, "You really do care?" I mean, it was like they were wondering, "You really are over here wondering what's going on with us?" And that was kind of going, "We care."
And I bet we'll hear a lot about the parking when we have the open house. Yeah.
And we should. We need to know what issues they because of the density, they might deal with different issues than what we've had in the other parts of Highland. We need to see what their concerns and how we can help them.
But I think it's important that they know about the trail system.
Correct.
And all the parks in the city, because they're paying to use those, so they might as well come use them.
I think we have don't we have a map of the trails of the parks?
Yeah, I reached out to JUB. Is that I'm working with, I forgot her name, Christina, and I'm having her make a brand new GIS map of our parks and trails, since the one that we have was, it was just really hard to read and look at, to be honest. So, we should have a brand new one.
Thank you.
And it'd be great if David brought a lot of maybe copies of this
citizen budget.
I've
got a couple in my office.
Yeah.
This is going to date me, but maybe it's time to reinstitute what they had in the 40s and 50s that I remember very well every time we moved, the welcome wagon. Mm-hmm. The welcome wagon brought in a basket of goodies and all kinds of information about businesses. And
we're the welcome wagon.
We're the welcome wagon.
And the funding for this is coming from my $3,000 council allocation.
Ron, that welcome wagon type duty is usually done by the Chamber of Commerce.
So anyway, Kate, with that, is there anything else that needs to be discussed? We do have a closed session, a real fast one. Chief, would you like to come up and address the council? Don't mess our time up. It's only 8:20. We're trying to get done. Our earliest time I've ever been on.
I'm not going to mess your time up. Just a reminder, on the 7th,
Oh,
breakfast
I'm sorry, I forgot to say.
for the 9/11 breakfast. So this
Oh, it's on my
Saturday,
calendar.
7 o'clock, come eat.
Okay, and then so that they're doing at 7 o'clock at the fire station breakfast. Also, council, I happen to be out of town this weekend, but down at the Highland Glen Park, the Highland East Steak is doing a service project, and so hopefully they'll come to your breakfast and go and do some service.
Okay. If you can get me a phone number for the Highland East Steak, I'll call them and tell them to come to breakfast.
Yeah.
Or somebody will.
Ron?
I can give you
Was it
phone
Starks?
number.
They're actually-
Josh, hold it. Josh Castleberry has the person that is coordinating all of it.
There's
All right.
actually several steaks that they're doing some
Yes,
acts
we
of
have,
service
we have
in the
the
next
Highland
week or
East
two.
Steak on the 7th, and then we have, I have one on the 14th, which is the Highland Boulevard West Steak. Is it on the 11th? We have one on the 11th. Let me see on the 11th, it is the Highland South Steak, which is doing the Murdoch Trail.
I'll get a hold of Josh. That's a lot in 1 week with the party, so started out with breakfast on the 7th.
Thank you for telling us. And then we have a week from today, we do have Lone Peak Public Safety meeting. So with that, we'll take a motion to adjourn, but we need to go into closed session to discuss a real estate purchase. Can I get a motion for that? We
Brooklyn,
go
can
into
you move
closed
the
session
slide? Oh, there you go.
for purchasing of real estate.
I move that the city council adjourn to a closed meeting in the executive conference room to discuss the purchase, exchange, or lease of real property.
I have a motion by Doug. I'll second it. Second by Ron. All in favor?
Aye.
We're now in closed session. If we can just meet in the back, this will be fast, guys.